Alright, so today we are going to talk about the different forms of government. Alright, so to start off, let's talk about who can participate in the governing process under each form of government. So with democracy, the political authority rests with the people. The governing is only done with the consent of the people. I think Abraham Lincoln says it best, government of the people, by the people, for the people. So again, people have a direct say with a democracy. Now, there are two types of democracy. We have direct democracy and indirect democracy. With direct democracy, the will of the people is translated into public policy through mass public meetings. This is also known as a pure democracy. This can really only work in small communities where it's easy for the people to meet and where there are a few problems or issues to discuss. It doesn't exist anywhere at a national level today. Indirect democracy is what we have here in the United States, and this is when people are chosen to act as representatives for those people and express the popular feelings of the people they represent. So people are given the opportunity to vote for these representatives, and this is a government by popular consent, and the people rule. With dictatorships, those who rule cannot be held responsible to the will of the people, simply meaning that they do not include the people in the decisions that they make. Dictatorships are the oldest and most common form of government known to history. However, they are not commonly used in today's world. All dictatorships are authoritarian, which just means that those in power hold absolute and unchallengeable authority over the people. Modern dictatorships have tended to be totalitarian as well. Typically, these institutions are militaristic in character, and they usually gain power by force. And then there's two types here of dictatorships. So the first one there is autocracy. This is a government in which a single person holds unlimited power. With an oligarchy, the power to rule is held by a small, usually self-appointed elite. Also understand modern dictatorships have been totalitarian, which just means that they exercise complete power over all aspects of human life. And some examples of these modern dictators would be Hitler, Stalin, and then countries China and North Korea. Alright, so here are some other types of government. Unitary government. This type of government is when the local governments have very little control and the national government holds most of the control. And the perfect example of this would be the colonies, the American colonies under British rule. So in that case, the national government had just about all of the power, could tell the colonies what they could and could not do. And we did not like having our colonies controlled by the national government in Great Britain. They taxed us with like the Stamp Act, the Declaratory Act, forced us to house soldiers in our homes with the Quartering Act. And this obviously led to the Declaration of Independence, the American Revolution, and one of the main reasons why we are an independent nation today. Another type here is a Confederate government. This is the type of government that we had under the Articles of Confederation. So in this case, the states were given a majority of the power, and the national government had much less power. A very weak national government. And what we realized under the Articles of Confederation is that this system of government was not working. It did not give the national government enough power to do the things that it needed to do. For example, it didn't have the power to tax the people, it didn't have the power to draft an army, so we had no protection. And so we, were really in need of some sort of replacement for the Articles of Confederation, and so we end up replacing it with the Constitution. The third type here is a federal government. This is the type of government we have under the Constitution. It's also known as federalism, and it is just shared power between the national government and the state governments. We decided to combine two strong national government and state government together. National government gets powers that are listed in the Constitution, and states get reserve powers that are not listed in the Constitution, but they are granted to them in the 10th Amendment. So the federal government handles laws, regulations, policies enacted, and they must fall within one of the powers specifically granted in the Constitution. And they typically deal with issues that are affecting the nation. States regulate issues of local concern, reserved powers from the 10th Amendment. This gives them the power to govern themselves and deal with issues affecting simply the state. The 10th Amendment is just any power not given to the federal government is given to the people or the states, in case you were not quite understanding that. Okay, geographical distribution of governmental power. So again here, a unitary government, all power belongs to a single central agency, aka Parliament. While local government may be created, they only really have the power to do what the central government allows them to. Again, unitary is going to be a centralized government. An example of this would be Great Britain. They have a single central organization, Parliament, that holds the government power. Local governments exist solely to relieve Parliament of burdens it could perform only with difficulty and inconvenience. Parliament could do away with these local governments at any time, and British government is democratic and unitary. Federal government, government that is divided between central and several local governments. The division of powers is on a geographic basis. So with this type here, both levels of government act directly on the people through their own set of laws, officials, and agencies. In the U.S., for example, the national government has certain powers, and the 50 states, which are unitary in nature, have others. This division of powers is set out in the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution stands above both levels of government. It is a law of the land, and it cannot be changed unless the people acting through the national government in the states agree to change it. So some examples where states are actually given power to make their own decisions would be like with pumping your own gas. So in 48 states you can pump your own gas. However, there are 2 states that have made the decision to not allow you to pump your own gas, and that's in New Jersey and Oregon. There's 5 states that do not have sales tax: Alaska, Delaware, New Hampshire, Montana, and Oregon. And then there's 16 states are directly involved in selling liquor. Also, in every government, I want you to understand this, in every government, the power to govern is located in one or more places geographically. From this standpoint, there are the 3 basic forms of government, and those again are unitary government, federal government, and confederate governments. And then here is the Confederate government, based on alliances where separate states create a central organization that only handles those matters that member states assign to it. Usually they do not have the power to make laws and affect individuals. So a Confederate structure makes it possible for several states to cooperate in matters of common concern and also retain their separate identities. Closest example today would be the European Union. This established free trade among its 25 member nations, launched a common currency, seeks to coordinate its member foreign and defense policies, and then again understand the United States under the Articles of Confederation and the Confederate States of America are also examples of this type of government. All right, relationship between the legislative and executive branches. Here are 2 different types of government, presidential and parliamentary. We have a presidential government, and Great Britain has a parliamentary government. So with a presidential government, the executive and legislative branches are separate, as you can see in this image here. Okay, so we have our legislative branch and our executive branch. They're independent of one another and are co-equal. There will be a chief executive president, and it is independent of the legislator, and the chief executive is here. With a parliamentary government, the executive is made of the prime minister, who is the leader of the majority in the parliament and is chosen by the body. Thus, the executive is chosen by the legislature. Okay, so with the presidential government, the president holds office for a fixed term and has broad powers not subject to the direct control of the legislative branch. The two branches regularly have several powers with which each and can block actions by the other branch, kind of that checks and balances. In the U.S. Constitution, it outlines the separation of powers between branches, and again, we use this type, we invented it. With the parliamentary government, the prime minister and the cabinet are often called the government. They remain in office only as long as their policies and administration have the confidence of a majority in Parliament. So then, how exactly are these two different? With the parliamentary government, the chief executive, okay, so their prime minister, is actually drawn from the legislative branch. With presidential, voters elect the chief executive, who is part, actually, of the executive branch. Okay, so how are they similar? Voters elect the legislative branch in both cases. Okay? So if you're still confused by that concept, take another look at that chart or image there, and it should clear it up. Voting for the president, so how does this work? So with the Electoral College, it's made up of 538 electors who cast votes to decide the president and vice president of the United States. When voters go to the polls, they choose which candidate receives their state's electors. So voters do not choose the president directly.